At precisely the same hour each morning, I encounter him, a merchant on the Chernyausik, whose eyes never quite meet mine. Instead, they dart sideways, measuring who might be watching, calculating the impression he creates. I have observed this man for 3 years now, watched him modulate his greetings according to each person's rank, seen him suppress what he genuinely thinks in favor of what will be well received. His entire bearing speaks of one question, asked silently but constantly: what do they think of me? Last winter, I saw him slip on ice near the bridge. His first response was not to tend his injury, but to glance around frantically who had witnessed this loss of dignity. The physical pain seemed almost irrelevant compared to his anguish at being seen in weakness. He suffered twice, once from the fall, once from his terror of judgment. This man is not unique. I see him everywhere in the scholar who softens his ideas for approval, the woman who cannot attend, theater without monitoring who observes her, the philosopher who builds his career on fashionable nonsense rather than truth. They are all variations of the same slavery, the same torture. But I have discovered something that transforms this understanding completely. The path to freedom does not lie where they imagine, and the freedom itself, when achieved, reveals truths about existence that philosophy has sought for millennia. During my daily walks through Frankfurt, I observe a torture so universal that most do not recognize their imprisonment. The merchant's darting eyes measure every word's effect. The scholar dilutes original thoughts with conventional pieties, terrified of disapproval. The woman at the theater attends not to the performance, but to who observes her. Here lies the paradox. Caring desperately about what others think transforms you into a puppet animated by invisible strings. Yet, when you cease caring entirely, become genuinely indifferent to human opinion, the strings are cut. You discover freedom, perhaps for the first time. But I warn you, this freedom is not license for egoistic brutality. The man who becomes callous to suffering has merely exchanged slaveries. He remains bound to his own will, that blind force of endless craving. The transformation requires something subtler. You must stop caring about others' opinions while simultaneously recognizing that no essential difference separates you from them, that the boundary between you and other is merely Maya, the veil of illusion. When you grasp this as living truth, not mere theory, your life changes in ways that reshape everything you understood about existence. Opinion slavery produces 2 devastating consequences. First, constant anxiety. Others' judgments fluctuate like smoke. The approval seeker's mood rises and falls like a cork in waves. He has given away his rudder. Second, he loses capacity for genuine action. Every deed calculates effect on his life's audience. Which profession? He consults not his nature, but social prestige. Which thought to express? He measures not truth, but likely response. His authentic will, his individual expression of the cosmic will, withers away. In my 30th year, my magnum opus met complete indifference. No reviews, no acknowledgement. I could court favor by softening positions, or serve truth regardless of consequences. I chose truth. Apply the deathbed test. Reviewing your life from final moments, can you identify one action from authentic nature rather than for approval? Most cannot. Their existence was performance for an audience who forgets them instantly. This is what is at stake whether you live authentically at all. Society prescribes more caring, greater sensitivity as remedies. This is backwards, like treating drowning with more water. You must understand the confusion between genuine care and approval-seeking slavery. I observed a Frankfurt merchant giving generously to charity, always publicly, ensuring witnesses. Contrast my private assistance to a beggar on my route, given quietly without seeking gratitude. One is performance, the other emerges from different source. Apply this diagnostic. If recognition were impossible, would you still act kindly? If yes, it may be genuine. If no, it is performance seeking approval. From childhood, you learn virtue equals winning approval. Morality means conforming. By adulthood, this conditioning is invisible. When I say stop caring, the performed self here has become cruel. But authentic nature operates from entirely different principles. The more desperately you seek approval, the more completely you lose yourself. Other people's opinions are not real. They are representations, phenomena, shadows cast by the blind. Will, the man praising you serves his will's momentary craving. Tomorrow his craving shifts, his opinion shifts thoughtlessly. The establishment ignored my work for decades, then praised it in my late years. Nothing. Changed the same words. Ignored at 40, were praised at 70. Their opinions were always phenomena, never touching essential reality. Grasp the distinction. The phenomenal world appearances governed by space, time, causality, versus the thing in itself, underlying reality. Opinions exist only in the phenomenal realm. Opinions are shadows, no substance, no weight. They shift constantly. To build identity around shadows is to pursue what cannot provide stability. When praised, pause. Ask, what craving of theirs am I satisfying? When criticized, what craving am I frustrating? This reframing from personal validation to impersonal will operation gradually dissolves opinion's power. What craves approval is the phenomenal self, the ego, believing itself separate from others. This ego needs external validation because it knows at some level it is illusion. It attempts to make real what is fundamentally unreal. During Berlin years, I scheduled lectures at Hegel's exact hour. 5. Students attended mine. His hall overflowed. The phenomenal self would experience this as devastating rejection. Having begun seeing through ego's illusion, I recognize this failure as liberation. The ego compares constantly, seeks superiority, requires validation. Your essential being, your manifestation of universal will simply is, without needing external confirmation. Modern prescriptions to build self-esteem reinforce false self's illusion. What is needed is not stronger ego, but seeing through ego entirely. Practice distinguishing voices. When approval-seeking arises, ask, is this essential being or phenomenal self? The ego voice is anxious, comparative. Deeper nature feels solid, unconcerned with relative position. True freedom requires recognizing no others exist. At deepest level, boundaries exist only phenomenally. While at the thing in itself level, there is only universal will manifesting in temporary forms. My dog Atma knows no separate self, has no ego requiring. Validation. Walking with Atma through forests, I glimpse this boundaryless state. The will driving his needs and my thoughts is the same blind force. Individual consciousnesses are waves on ocean, appearing separate but all the same water. When you grasp this, you cannot seek approval from what is ultimately yourself, nor can you be indifferent to your own suffering viewed through different lens. The Upanishads teach tattvamasi, that art thou. When you see another suffering, you witness the will, constituting your inner being, expressing itself differently. Why does this dissolve approval seeking? The structure depends on belief in essential separation. When boundary is recognized as phenomenal only, this structure collapses naturally. Before escaping the trap, you must see how it operates in you with merciless honesty. During Dresden years, writing my magnum opus, I kept a private journal recording every approval-seeking instance, modifying arguments for palatability, worrying how Goethe would receive my color theory, calculating whether formulations would offend academics. The horror of seeing this pervasiveness even in me, writing philosophy, was almost unbearable, but necessary. Only by confronting the mechanism fully could I begin freeing myself. Keep a journal, no one will see. Write daily instances. I said X instead of Y because I feared Z would think me A. 5 entries daily minimum. Watch yourself without judgment. Judgment creates resistance. Observation reveals truth. Notice when genuine thought is suppressed, the physical sensation accompanying approval seeking, the mental rehearsal of responses. When you see slavery clearly, you face terrifying emptiness. If I am not my performed self, who am I? Most flee back to slavery. Understand, the void is not your destruction, but false self's dissolution. What feels like death is prerequisite for rebirth. As false self weakens, you perceive something beneath your individual manifestation of will, your authentic nature with its own character. I chose philosophy, not for approval, but because I could not do otherwise. My nature expressing itself indifferent to consequences. Learn this discrimination. Do you actually want this, or want to want it for appearance? Authentic desire arises spontaneously. Want to want is ego calculating what would make you appear good. Your true nature feels solid rather than anxious, arises spontaneously, persists when disapproved of, brings intrinsic satisfaction. It may include qualities society disapproves, misanthropy, intensity, peculiarity. Accept this. Practice deliberate defiance. Act against approval-seeking instincts in low-stakes situations. Express unpopular opinion. Wear what pleases you. Decline obligation-based invitation. Each defiance weakens the pattern's grip. During Frankfurt walks, I encountered the same beggar for years. Initially, my assistance was partly performative. As freedom deepened, I saw his hunger not as his problem requiring charity, but as the will suffering, the same craving causing my hunger expressing differently. Assistance continued quietly, without audience, without needing gratitude. This shift from performed charity to genuine compassion marks the difference between freedom that isolates and freedom that connects. Practice suffering contemplation. Regularly contemplate witnessed suffering. Ask, what is this suffering's nature? Look deeply. It is identical to yours. The dog's craving and your craving spring from the same source. Genuine compassion emerges spontaneously from unity recognition, because it recognizes no essential they and me. Living from ground of being is gradual settling. You act from authentic nature as default. You extend compassion without calculation. You pursue truth not for reward, but because it expresses something eternal. You will repeatedly fall back. The path is cyclical, spiraling toward freedom. Each return becomes slightly easier. My Frankfurt routine unchanged for 27 years. Waking without consulting others' expectations, cold water bathing, working on philosophical problems regardless of recognition, precise daily walk with Atma. Meals alone reading the Times, while others perform socially. This is natural rhythm emerging, when not constantly adapting to others' expectations. Appears eccentric to outsiders, but internally coherent. When you cease performing, most relationships dissolve. They were never genuine. Mutual performance, mirrors reflecting mirrors. Do not mourn these losses. What remains? Connections where both speak honestly, because neither requires approval. In solitude and intellectual work, most accessible. In social settings with power differentials, requires conscious effort. In intimate relationships, finest discriminations, needed. Begin identifying your authentic rhythm. Notice when you feel most alive, productive, peaceful, regardless of social norms. If you work best at night, do so. If you need solitude, take it. Social isolation may result initially. Accept this cost. When reviewers finally notice my work, many attack viciously, pessimistic nonsense, dangerous nihilism. I felt no injury to essential being. Their opinions are phenomena, shadows. Truth stands independent of approval or rejection. I could consider whether critiques revealed genuine flaws. Occasionally they did, while remaining undamaged by overall rejection. When criticized, notice immediate reaction. Does your body tense? Compulsion to justify. This is ego defense, false self-experiencing attack on illusory existence. The free man's response: curiosity about valid points, but no sense of essential being threatened. Critique, acknowledge, and adjust. Invalid critique, reflecting critics. Practice the pause. When criticized, pause before responding. Ask, is essential being actually threatened? This creates space between stimulus and response, preventing automatic ego defense. Most attacks are not personal. They are phenomena interacting with phenomena. I contrast two Frankfurt figures: the merchant giving prominently to charity, ensuring witnesses, versus my quiet assistance to the beggar, given privately, without seeking gratitude. The merchant exhausts himself performing generosity while remaining empty. My assistance costs less emotionally because it requires no audience, no validation. Apply the audience test. If recognition were impossible, would you still act kindly? If yes, it may be genuine. If no, it is performance. The approval seeker gives while monitoring response, calculating, gratitude, ensuring witnesses, feeling resentful when appreciation seems insufficient. This exhausts. Genuine compassion, requiring no audience, costs less emotionally while serving others more authentically. This applies to all creative endeavor. The approval-seeking scholar researches fashionable topics, cites proper authorities, softens insights. His work is dead thought corpse arranged to please. The free scholar pursues genuine questions, follows arguments where they lead. His work lives because it springs from authentic engagement with reality. Suffering is inescapable because the will can never be permanently satisfied. But there exists hierarchy. Suffering intrinsic to existence, hunger, pain, disease, mortality is one level. Suffering added through desperate need for approval is another, wholly unnecessary level. I watched a man with evident ailment at Englischer Hof, his discomfort visible, pain unavoidable. But what amplified suffering was constant anxiety about how his condition appeared, attempts to hide weakness, shame, needing assistance. He suffered twice, from ailment, inevitable, from concern with others' judgments, voluntary. Imagine a man with broken leg, inevitable suffering. Then he tortures himself. Why did this happen? What do others think of my weakness? The broken leg is one level. His anxious questions add unnecessary second level. When you cease caring about opinions, you do not eliminate suffering, but you eliminate that second layer. This is liberation not from human condition, but from torture we add voluntarily. Distinguish inevitable from voluntary suffering. When pain arises, that is first level, experience it. When you worry, what do others think? That is second level, see it and release it. Freedom from opinion slavery reveals profound truths. I described 3 moments. Defending my color theory against Newton, despite Goethe's encouragement for diplomacy, I chose truth over politics. Losing myself in musical performance, playing wooden flute boundary between player and music dissolving. Assisting the beggar from recognition that his suffering and mine share identical source. For 2 millennia, Western philosophy sought to ground morality in reason, divine command, social contracts, all inadequate foundations. The true foundation is recognition that boundaries between selves are illusory. When you injure another, you injure yourself literally at the will's level. Compassion arises spontaneously from this recognition. The approval seeker must choose between truth and approval. Most choose approval. Men profess what advances careers regardless of correspondence to reality. When genuinely indifferent to approval, you can serve truth without compromise. Art offers temporary liberation through contemplating eternal ideas but only for one freed from opinion. The man viewing art, while calculating how responses appear, cannot achieve genuine aesthetic experience. Only the free man can lose himself completely in artwork. These domains, ethics, truth, art, spring from the same source. I sit now in my 72nd year, approaching phenomenal existence's end. For most of my life, I lived in obscurity work ignored, lectures unattended, philosophy dismissed. Only in these final years has recognition arrived. Too late for career, but perfectly timed to confirm what I always knew. Truth requires no validation. Genuine work endures regardless of contemporary opinion. The highest achievement possible is what I call denial of will, not suppressing it violently, but ceasing to identify with it, recognizing it as blind force rather than your essential self. The ego, desperately needing validation, is the will in its most insistent form. Metaphysical resignation is not despair, but recognizing the phenomenal world, including all dramas of approval and rejection, is ultimately representation only. You continue to act, create, engage, but without torture of requiring these activities, prove your worth, or confirm your existence. Practice witness consciousness. Observe your own will operations without identifying. When craving arises, notice. The will is craving recognition. This subtle shift creates distance between awareness and blind force driving you. I offer not consolation, not optimism, but something more valuable: the possibility of living freely despite suffering intrinsic to existence. When you stop caring about opinions while recognizing unity with others, your life changes not because circumstances improve, but because you have ceased adding voluntary torture to inevitable suffering. This is as much liberation as is possible for beings like us, and it is sufficient. The door stands open. The key has always been in your hand.